catlovedreamingbeach.com.
I feel like I can be a little more discreet. Looks more bug. Looks more like I might be having a phone call. And I think you can actually hear me better with this. Anyway, a very nice old man crossing guard just told me I look tired. I'm like, well, thank you very much. You don't even know me, but I am tired. But he was nice. And I can pause? Wow, upgrade. Anyway, guys, hello. Hi, sweet peaches. I'm just jumping into the beginning, tripping into the beginning of this video to say, well, I did write a comment. Hold on, let me move my bag to the other arm. My pretty umbrella. Put that over there. Okay. Maybe this won't be as bouncy. I do look tired as fuck. But I'm in the 20% right now, at least according to the chats. Very, very unpopular opinion. And I really do feel convinced of my unpopular position. I believe that Karen Reed hit John O'Keefe. And I believe either she did it angrily at the moment, and then when she started to, like, she was calling him, screaming all this stuff, called him like 30 times, gets back to his apartment or his house, and we did hear some clacking around, right? She was clacking around on one of those calls, on one of those voicemails. Like, what was she doing? Who knows? We'll never know. She could have just been getting ready for bed. You know, it's kind of like Alan Jackson likes to show something and then make a huge inference. For example, they show the parking lot and they're like, oh my God, he didn't move any cars. But it's like, well, there was this like long clip where you didn't see anything. So how do you know that there weren't cars right off where the camera couldn't see that he was moving around? You know? Similar to the faulty logic that, oh, you guys didn't see John on the lawn, therefore he couldn't have been there, which is not accurate. He's trying to equate one thing with another, which is everything. This whole case is a bait and switch, clickbait, conflate, equate one thing to another, leaping, jumping, quantum leaping to conclusions, wild assumptions saying, you know, for example, with Trooper Proctor, well, because he was stupid and immature and crass enough to send nasty texts, therefore, we must assume that he was willing to frame an innocent woman for murder and tamper with evidence and put his entire career on the line, which he did apparently. I'll take this off. Hey, whoop. Well, anything's possible, I suppose, huh? I really do have this hair that likes to grow forward, which, anyway, now I remember why I don't record myself walking and talking anymore. Because it's herky, it's jerky, there's a lot of cars driving by, there's a lot of things that are private. Oh. That could get captured in video. Anyway, I just wanted to make a quick intro to say, I know that my opinion, I am in the minority of minorities, and I could very well be wrong. And maybe I'm the delusional one. And I do feel that way a bit when I'm listening to the trial. I've started to avoid reading the chat because there's a loud truck coming by. I've started to avoid reading the chats because every time I do, I get so frustrated, and then I get distracted, and then I get like caught up in that aggravation. And it is aggravating because it feels like every single speck of evidence that comes out, the chat is just like reality deniers, finger pointers, twisters of fact. And it's frustrating, it's annoying, and some of my this lighting is so awful. I'm old, by the way. This lighting, I mean, although it's nice out, even with the little rain. Some people have said, like, the jury is probably reading chats and watching streams, and it's like, first of all, why the fuck would they do that? You don't think that those people have lives outside of Karen Reed? Like somebody did an all caps comment yesterday at the end of trial. What's so important about leaving at 4 o'clock? And somebody intelligently responded, well, not everybody's life revolves around Karen Reed. Like, you know, some people have kids to pick up or lives of their own. You know, they might have jobs or spouse, or maybe they just want to go the fuck home. And you seriously think that these people who are going to spend the next 8 weeks of their life, who are spending like probably 8 hours at least a day, considering getting up, getting ready, getting there, being there by 9, probably get there a little early. Let's see. So it's like a 7-hour day. You know, they all probably live pretty local, but you know, you don't know how everybody gets there, how early they need to. So it's easily like 9 hours out of their day from getting up, getting ready, getting there, spending their day, getting home, and unwinding. You know, and you really think they fucking are gonna go home and spend all night watching fucking YouTube videos about the trial? I mean, again, you never know. There could be a total fanatic who slipped through the entire jury selection process, who is a plant. Now, I was saying in one video, if the defense plants a fake witness, that's awful, it's criminal. If a prosecutor plants a fake witness, that's Nazi level shit. Do you get the difference? Like, the people who are pro Karen Reed, you're basically saying they're Nazis. They are completely fabricating a false crime, even though she herself said he was right where she left him. And her privilege came out when she said, it's just a postage stamp. It's not Amherst Farms or whatever she said. It's just 50 feet, which is not 50 feet, it's 100 feet by 75 feet, and that's being, that's underestimating, because I'm not really bringing all the property line into that, just like what the Google scale showed how many feet across and long the lawn is. And again, it's like I showed in my one video, if you step out on a 20-foot lawn, of course, if 10 people walk by a 20-foot lawn and nobody sees him, you could be like, he probably wasn't there. But Alan Jackson is trying to make one thing be the other. You didn't see him the size of a lawn? What do you mean? You didn't see that man all the way over there in the snow, in the dark, where you weren't looking and you had to turn your back to walk to your car. You can even see in my outro, the neighbor, it's a snowstorm. I like to screen lapse the sky and stuff. And one day it was a storm, so I like screen recorded the whole day. And there's the neighbor like standing, he's standing, and then they get in the car and they drive away. And you can see in that little 2-second clip how it's dark. You can't really see that well. The lights of the headlights light up right directly in front of the car. Like it said in the other video I did, car headlights are not lighting up your lawn when you're pulling off. It's not lighting up the whole thing. It's lighting up your view directly in front of you. And it creates a shadow along the edge. So it would almost have been impossible, I think, for them to see him unless they were specifically looking for him. Like Karen. Remember when Karen saw him, it was still dark. Yet she saw him. A buffalo on the prairie. A lump covered with snow out in the elements like that. She was expecting to find him on the side of the road, and the awful feeling. Oh wow, they're doing that. Oh shoot. I was going to take a picture of something, but then it'll stop my video. Actually, I could do that anyway. Well, that was supposed to just be a quick intro. I guess it became a whole long thing. But I really did want to just finish up saying I am fully aware that my opinion is 20%. That is low. And I don't know if it's because I'm just truly not seeing something. I'm just missing it. Or what I kind of suspect, which I could be wrong about, but what I suspect is that the chats are being flooded by pro-Karen Reed people. Like, there's always some discrepancy, no matter what results. You know, I mean, I will say with Alec Murdaugh, I don't know, I think he was definitely 80% guilty. And I know that like Hannah Gutierrez Reed, people were like very pro-guilty. And I thought that she did the thing, but I didn't want it to be too harsh because of all of the extenuating circumstances. And I was wrong. Like, she got the full, but it was 18 months. But I also was able to predict that Carrie Morrissey was super corrupt, and her whole case got thrown out for Brady violations because of her fucking shady shenanigans. So I wasn't wrong about that. It was just, it didn't help. Oops. Oh, fuck. It didn't help Hannah. So there was that. And, you know, Sarah Boone. I knew that bitch was going to jail for life. So anyway, again, I could be wrong, but I really do feel that this 80-20 split with pro-Karen, you know, free Karen readers, I feel like it's skewed and not what the jury will actually feel. That's my prediction. Time will tell. Hey, sweet peaches, how are you? It's Monday, May 12th, 2025. It's 1:16 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Karen Reed trial, day 14. They're at their lunch break. And the chats continue to be heavily pro Karen. Just got some more clothes for my kiddos and a couple for me for summer. So I want to look at them a little bit while I just give my thoughts. So it's Sergeant Yuri Buchanek again. Cute shorts. And let's see, I had said Karen is cool talking, lying on camera, but not under oath in court. Oh, I said that. Today, Alan Jackson to Yuri Buchanek. Did you know someone at the Canton Police Department accessed John's Ring app on his cell phone? So I just want to answer the question that I asked, because I know that the people, so the question is, why would Trooper Proctor delete ring camera footage of Karen Reed getting back to John O'Keefe's house at 12:36 a.m. And if he did that, then that would mean probably, right, that he also deleted the camera footage, the ring camera footage of Karen showing Jen and Kerry the broken tail light, or you believe that they lied about that. And then you would also be believing that when Jen said, Karen mentioned the taillight, not on the very first call at 4:53, but she said, Karen said, you know, John never came home. I left him at the waterfall. And then when she hung up, her husband said, like, you saw them outside. And then when she called back, she said, well, I saw you outside my sister's house. And then she mentioned she broke her taillight somehow. So that means that you believe she's lying. Although if you believe that Karen Reed is innocent, then you do believe that everything Jen McCabe is saying is a lie, and you believe everything Matt McCabe is saying is a lie, everything Kerry Roberts said is a lie, everything Brian Albert said is a lie, everything Colin Albert said is a lie, Sarah Levinson was a liar, Julie Nagel was a liar, Ryan Nagel, her brother, was a liar, Heather Maxim, the ex-girlfriend of Ryan, is a liar. The friend Ricky who was driving, did he testify? I don't know. The EMT was a liar. All 3, 4, all 5 of them were a liar. Like, everybody's a liar. But back to what I was saying, to answer that question, like, why would pro Karen readers think that Michael Proctor would delete those videos? So I guess you would say, well, her taillight wasn't broken when she came home from 12:36, when she got back to John's house, and he deleted that. And you believe that she broke her taillight on John's car when she backed in, even though there was literally no evidence on the video that that tiny little bump resulted in any breakage, because you could see nothing fell, no snow fell off the back of his car, nothing fell into the snow. There was literally no indentation on the snow right there. So the evidence that you're trying to show that she broke her taillight right there, to me, is evidence that she didn't break her taillight right then. So, but why would he delete a portion? So it's like, okay, so I guess you believe that Kerry and Jen colluded to lie and together to say, to both testify that Karen Reed showed them her busted taillight, and Trooper Proctor knew that they were going to say that, and so he went in and he deleted the ring camera footage of them leaving, which showed that she didn't show them. Just got a text. right? Like, this is a lot of crazy thinking. You know, so do you believe that the deleted ring camera footage from John's house shows Karen getting back at 12:36 with a busted taillight that she deleted, Karen showing Jen and Carrie McCabe her busted taillight, which she deleted, Karen's brother and father and herself getting to the house, and maybe she showed them the busted taillight and they were looking at the busted taillight and she deleted that. Maybe that's why she deleted that. What do you think about that? Or do you believe that Trooper Proctor, so in order for Trooper Proctor to delete the ring footage of Jen and Carrie leaving with Karen and them not stopping to look at the taillight, they would have had to have fabricated this story, and he would have had to know that and like deleted the ring camera footage so that they could lie about. Like, it's so fucking crazy to think about the mental gymnastics and the literal mind reading that they would have had to be able to do. Like, Jen would have had to be an absolute mind reader to know that Karen would start yelling, you know, could I have hit him? Could I have hit him? Did I hit him? Like, you know, she would have had to, like, how would she have known that Karen was going to say all that stuff, which would make everybody start to suspect that maybe she had hit him? Like, it's just such a fabrication that even trying to like put my mind in the mindset of somebody who believes that Trooper Proctor deleted ring camera like, wouldn't it make more sense that he was looking at the ring camera footage so he could get a fucking sense of what was happening, because he was investigating? And again, I'm not in any way agreeing that he did a good job. And, you know, I think that even Sergeant Yuri Buchanan saying like he was honorable and all that stuff, you know, I think that was too far. And what he, you know, I understand. He was parsing it out to say, well, he did have integrity when he was doing the investigation. He just said some fucked up shit on a group chat he should have never said, but that had nothing to do with the investigation. That's what your Buchanan's vibe was about that. And, you know, and I don't agree with that, because even in a fucking private group chat, you shouldn't be saying that stuff. So he should have pushed back on what Michael Proctor did at least a little bit. And I think that would have, you know, given him more integrity in the eyes of some of these total, you know, pro-Kareners. But again, the people who are pro-Karen, it's like there's nothing he could have done or said, I think, to make them think that he's not a liar, because they've already decided it. It's like every single thing any witness does or says, or any piece of evidence that comes out, they've already formulated in their mind how it's fake, how it's false, how it was planted, how, you know, somehow it's in the defense's favor. And it's just like, I mean, yeah, I guess in like the most extreme case it could be, but like, what was Carrie's motivation for doing all this? Like, why would Carrie want to implicate herself as a co-conspirator to a murder? Why would she want John to be murdered? Why would she want to cover up whoever murdered him? Like, that's the other thing that these people don't seem to understand who believe this pro-Karen stuff. Like, it seems on the face of it, on the evidence, and on the way they've testified, the things they've said, the stories they've given, the histories, everything, that they all really liked him. Even Brian Higgins' text messages with Karen Reed show that he liked John. He thought John was a good guy. And I want to say, when Karen said, oh, John likes you, he said he likes you more and more. Last week you said something and he was like, oh, I like Brian even more and more. To me, that was a clue that she absolutely picked Brian on purpose. She pinpointed Brian because he was a particular person that he was, you know, he's generally attractive-ish. He's just her type. He's tall. He's, you know, a cop. And John liked him. So somebody who you're somebody who you esteem is probably going to make you feel more jealous than just some rando at the hillside, you know, low comps at the hillside. Anyway, it's 2:17. I got to head over to get my car from the mechanic, even though they fucking pushed mine to the side, even though they told me it was going to be ready, and I got to like figure out how to get my car. But anyway, I got to go do that. And then I have work to do that I've been pushing off because I've been doing this and other things. And then, well, actually, I'm glad, like, I was so behind. It was almost 11, and I was like, oh, I haven't even gotten to trial yet. And I was like, oh, I'll just push it off so I can fast forward all the breaks. And then court got canceled for today for an unknown reason. But actually, I'm glad about that because that gave me time to focus on this video, and I'll be able to post it, and I'm not missing out. I'm not behind. Even though, just to share, I am definitely not going to be making a video every single day about trial the day of. Like, I'm not going to be posting updates and recaps and thoughts about every single day of trial, every single day that trial is, you know. Like, I'm definitely going to have to do my recaps a few days behind. And I'm probably going to start doing, like, recaps of, you know, multiple days in one. Because, again, this is going to be, like, at least 6 more weeks, probably. And, you know, I'm not going to need to recap every single day, I don't think. So, anyway, just letting you know that. And I really appreciate my new subscribers. And don't forget to hit subscribe. And I'll see you later. Well, the video is going to continue. And I wrote, John's cell phone, the Ring camera app that was showing his garage. Yuri said no, but my question is, if the Canton police were trying to frame Karen, why would they delete specific clips that seem to be the ones that are missing? Specifically, 12:36 a.m. showing Karen getting back to her house after she allegedly hit him or dropped him off at 34 Fairview Road, Canton, Massachusetts. That would have shown her broken taillight or not broken taillight. And the clip where she's supposedly showing Jen McCabe and Carrie Roberts the broken taillight, that's deleted. And then there was a clip of her father and brother and herself coming back, and that's supposedly deleted. So why, oh why, if Michael Proctor is trying to frame Karen, would he be accessing John's Ring camera footage then just to specifically delete footage that helps exonerate her? Right? Because there was the clip when those cops went to do a wellness check and they parked behind her car. I believe it was clear that her taillight was already broken, and it was just filled in with snow. And some people who, again, the people who seem to really love Karen Reed, most of them are saying things in the chat which make it clear to me, y'all are, sorry to say, but desperate, thirsty, delusional, like detached from reality, delusions of grandeur, narcissistic, like out of control, believe, like you're willing to believe 60 plus people are lying, but you're not willing to believe this one particular person who's already been caught in multiple lies on camera is lying. Like, how does it make sense? You would rather believe that every single cop, every single EMT, every single friend, every single person is corrupt. They all know that John was murdered. They all know why. Or they know why, or they know that it was a big enough deal to cover it up. Like, what they're trying to say is that 60 plus people are aware that John O'Keefe, the man who stepped in to take over to raise his niece and nephew who were orphaned when they were 3 and 6 years old,
when his sister tragically died after being diagnosed with a freaking tumor or something, and then 5 months later she fucking dies, and then 2 months later her husband has a fucking heart attack, orphaning his niece and nephew who are only 3 and 6 years old, and he decides to step in, and he was their dad for us 9 years, the last 2 of which included the fucking bitch, in my opinion, Karen Reed, who said in text messages to Brian Higgins, we dated 20 years ago, then his sister died and everything got fucked up. There are birds that, get away! The birds are literally eating my screen apart. It's got this much gone because the birds are coming and fucking taking the threads and making their nests with my fucking screen. Damn it. Anyway, it gets me so passionate because this man was so important. He was so loved and beloved. He was such a good guy. And Karen was a scumbag. Karen was a fucking lying, cheating, two-timing. She was lying about John. She was disparaging the children. She was disparaging what he was doing with the children. She's like, we dated 20 years ago, then his sister died and everything got fucked up, and I never even wanted kids anyway. Then why the fuck did you step in to start dating John 7 years into him being a dad with 2 kids? You knew that. It wasn't a shock. It's not like she was dating him and then the sister died and then he's like, oh, I'm going to take on these kids, and all of a sudden she's doing something she had no idea. She knew. She fucking knew. And she didn't want those children, and she didn't care for them and about them. She had the nerve to call them spoiled when she's the one who was spoiling them. I mean, John said the reason he's mad about her spoiling them is because literally everybody else does spoil them because they feel bad about the shit that, you know, they went through. And so he's like, I'm always ending up being the bad guy, and I want you to be able to understand that and be on my side, not another fucking person I have to explain this shit to. When again, I'm paraphrasing from the text messages, but it's like, are you fucking for real, people? You sick motherfuckers. And I am so mad about Emily D. Baker taking the stance that she's taking, but you know what? I guess it's the popular stance to say like, oh, this poor fucking victim, Karen, look at how she's being mistreated. And like Emily had a video the other day and the title was Brian Higgins text revealed. And I'm like, don't you mean Karen Reed's text revealed? Brian Higgins, yeah, revealed that he's fucking discerning. He was suspicious. He was like, how'd you get my number? And why? Why are you texting me? Don't you have a boyfriend? And on and on and on. He wouldn't let it go. And yeah, he was like, okay, I'm willing to like chat with you and see what's up. But it was freaking obvious to anyone who's not a delusional fucking borderline personality narcissist with delusions of grandeur and probably histrionic personality disorder as well. I think anyone, you know, who's not looking for the next best drama, but an actual like real life person who's able to be discerning, use critical thinking, and think things through. Why? Why did they kill this man? What has anyone proven that this man knew, was a part of, was about to expose? What? And oh, I've seen a few people saying, oh, the Sarah Birchmore case. Just because some whack job fringe extremists on internet say fucking things, that doesn't make it true. And people get so mad in the comments, and they just constantly make these comments that make it so clear they don't know anything about the legal process. They think everything is just a total drama, a fictional, delusional world where they can just do and say anything they want to, and you know, evidence and facts and the law and precedent, and none of that matters because, oh my god, free Karen Reed, they're guilty, they're all guilty. I'm like, okay, y'all, it's giving pathetic. And I'm still watching because I'm interested in it, but like, Yikes. The Karen cult is a bunch of Karens. That's what it seems like. Y'all a bunch of Karens. Karen's going to jail. I think she really is. All right. Trial's over for the day. It is 4:50 and 44 seconds. On Monday, May 12th, day 14 of trial. I gotta go get my kid. I gotta get some clothes. Oops. So I'm back home. Got my kid back home. So, my extremely unpopular opinion and prediction. I'm going to make a wild prediction that goes against all, like 80% of the chats in all of the streams on Karen Read retrial. And my prediction is she is going to be found guilty and get 20+ years. Or, well, the thing about, like, she could get 5 years, but the reason why I don't think she'll get 5 years is because I have a few different assessments that I think, and I could be wrong, and I could be proven wrong when deliberation happens, which will probably be in like 6 weeks from now. So there's a lot of trial to go. I could change my mind. I may end up feeling completely different. Last trial, I went back and forth between various opinions, and ultimately coming away with feeling like I don't know. I felt like I had doubt. I did feel like I had doubt. This time, however, I have less doubt because it's being laid out so much clearer this time, you know. Oh, so another thing I wanted to say is that I went back to my old video where I had screen recorded Brian Higgins reading out the texts between him and Karen, and I re-screen recorded it because, I shared Yuri Buchanek reading it out, and then I wanted to read them out myself, but I had to actually do some work for clients. It's kind of warm. So I had to do some work for clients, so I kind of put that on pause, and I may still read it out because I want to, but I re-screen recorded Brian Higgins reading it out, and I did screen record it. I think it was 0.125 speed, and when I tried to like slow it back down, his voice was distorted and the sound was weird, so I'm just gonna leave it like that. It's about 35 minutes. And I just cannot help but feel, number one, the people in the chats who are extremely pro Karen Read, there seems to be this recurring theme with them, which is everybody's a liar. Every single witness is a liar. Every piece of evidence is false, fake, planted, not real. All the lies only come from it's like 60 people. So what they believe is that there's 60 people in a town that all know that John O'Keefe was murdered for some reason, that it's worth covering it up. So people who believe that Karen Read is innocent and being framed literally believe that about 60 people they actively know that John O'Keefe was murdered in the house at 34 Fairview Road in Canton, Massachusetts. They know that he was murdered. They know that it has to be covered up. And they all are in on this enormous, gigantic conspiracy to frame a woman a woman who had about 7 drinks that night, 7 to 5. Can you hear that? And don't forget her alcoholic math that she did in that one of the interviews where she was talking about, oh, well, it was so weak. That drink was so weak to my taste. It tasted like dirty water. So I had to add another shot of vodka just to make it taste like a regular drink. So, they counted 7, but I think it's really like 4. Okay, alcoholic math. So there's a woman. She drinks excessively. Whether or not she has an addiction, I'm not going to claim to know. But she's drinks a lot. She's clearly instigating an attempt to cheat on her boyfriend of 2 years, who is raising his niece and nephew because they tragically lost their parents, his sister and brother-in-law. She resents him for raising these kids. She thinks that he shouldn't be doing it and that he's not cut out for it, even though it's none of her fucking business to make that assessment. He'd been raising them for 7 full years when she stepped back into the picture, so she'd been done known about it. So why the fuck are you dating a man who is raising these 2 children who've already been through so much? The last thing they need in their new dad's life, dad, uncle, is for the girlfriend to fucking resent their existence, okay? And the way she frames, in her mind, the way she seems to think about their parents dying is, well, she dated Brian, she dated John when they were kids, and so probably like when they were in their 20s, and he was really close to his sister, but the sister died and everything got fucked up. I mean, yeah, things get fucked up when people die. So anyway, I just find it like, who the fuck are these people who think Karen Read is so likable? It's so wonderful. It's like, on the one side, you've got John, a cop, who seemed like a good man, who stepped up to be a dad for his niece and nephew, who were 3 and 6 year old. That is so young. They need so much. Oh my God. And he stepped in to be this person. And then on the other side, you've got Karen fucking Read, a wealthy, spoiled, bitter, aggressive, like not nice woman, a fucking kid hater. She didn't like kids. She didn't want kids. She's a cheater. She's a liar. She's a backstabber. She's jealous. She's unhinged. She screams "fuck you" to people she doesn't even know. She is just, she's like, she won't stop calling and texting. She's a fucking stalker. Like, this is the pussin'. This is your fucking damsel in distress, Karen fucking Read. The most unlikable woman since Wendy Adelson. Well, there's probably been some other very unlikable women before. I mean, since, to be honest, I won't put her in the Lori Vallow zone, but I would put her in a fucking, maybe not as bad as Sarah Boone, but I do think she's going to Sarah Boone herself, in the sense that Sarah Boone was offered a 5-year plea. 5 years. She would have 5 years and be out, that crazy bitch. Thank God she's not. And instead, because she was so malignantly narcissistic that she thought that she could talk her way out of a fucking murdered suitcase case. That bitch is in jail for life, thank God. And I am starting to believe that, despite the unhinged comments on the YouTube streets, I feel like the prosecution is really laying out their case pretty well, and the defense is clearly doing their deflect. They've got some juicy nuggets. They've got some nasty text that Trooper Proctor did. They had the solo cups and the leaf blower, which on second blush seem actually maybe like a good thing that he did that and got that little bit of evidence before it was completely buried under 2 feet of snow. So is it a bad thing, or is it quick thinking in an emergency? Okay, I'm going to play this. This moment at 5:23, when Karen calls John, she leaves a message. The auto caption
not answered. Up. The defendant calls John, not answered. 5:21:28 a.m. The defendant calls John, not answered. 5:21:58 a.m. The defendant calls John, not answered. 5:23:26 a.m. The defendant calls John. Voicemail number 7 is left with voice. It's coming.
Okay.
5:23:26 a.m. The defendant calls John. Voicemail number 7 is left with voice. It's coming.
Okay, so the
defendant calls John, not answered. 5:21:58 a.m. The defendant calls John, not answered. 5:23:26 a.m. The defendant calls John. Voicemail number 7 is left with voice. It's coming.
So the auto-generated captions on TikTok heard that. You see the blue, the white with blue behind it. John, where are you? That is what TikTok auto-generated captions heard her saying. John, where are you? That was at 5:23 a.m. and 26 seconds. So this is the 40th call. She has already called Kerry and Jen. According to Jen McCabe, Karen called her right between where it says 36 and number 37. She called Jen and Kerry. Jen said she called her at 4:53 a.m. So, and then at some point, maybe around this 38th call, is when she's pulling out of John's driveway, where what we believe is a broken taillight. Some of us do. Some people think she hit it on John's car, but there was no evidence of anything falling down on the ground in that video. And what I'm wondering is
5:04:27 a.m. The defendant calls John.
As she continued to call,
the defendant calls John.
She was with
5:23:26
Kerry and
5:24:27 a.m. The defendant.
And she continues to call
a.m.
again and again and again.
29:46 a.m.
She's
31:21 a.m. The defendant calls John.
Calling.
Not answered. 5:36:29 a.m. The defendant calls John.
And then the very
not answered.
last call
6:03:02 a.m. The defendant calls John. And voicemail number 8 is left with
911.
some voice and noise and background. Ms. Gilman, could you play that, please?
With them on the lawn.
There was a break, half-hour break.
So I just went back and screen recorded like a 3-minute clip from my video that I recently shared, where Sergeant Garino was going through all of her missed calls and the voicemails. So let me reflect. Thank you again for being here and for your support. They wrote a comment about possibly Karen's device or something was pinging in the vicinity of 34 Fairview at around 5:23, and that there was a voicemail. And so if the auto-generated captions from TikTok, which read it as her saying, John, where are you, is correct, I find it inconclusive. I find her voicemails and all the missed calls, again, to be, like, it seems like every single thing in this case, one of those things where you could look at it from either angle, and you can say, well, the fact that she was calling him like crazy, she supposedly was dropping him off to go to an after party, like just some friends getting together at one of their house, and the son was turning 20 something and had a few friends over in that age range. So it's like kind of like a wholesome family kind of thing, like not really a party, just like a after hours get together, we're not done hanging out yet kind of deal. Which is what I was saying, that I think that for Karen, she truly did not want to go there because it was a much more intimate small scale setting with just a handful of people, and she was literally going to be face to face with the man that she had been trying to fuck on the down low. And now that I have the dates more accurate, January 12th was the first day that she had reached out to Brian Higgins, unbeknownst to him, uninitiated by him. Alan Jackson trying to frame Brian as desperate and like, oh, he was ghosted and, he was jealous. And it's like, what the fuck? Alan, you drinking the fucking Kool-Aid, or more likely, you're just a defense attorney who doesn't actually give a fuck if she ends up in prison or not, because you're going to get paid either way. So make up any salacious, bullshit, delusional fantasy out there, just the most unhinged thing. And there's tons of people who, for some sad, pathetic, desperate reason, are willing to believe it. And I actually, at this point, do not believe that the majority of like the average person who heard about this case, who would be sitting on that jury, who would be listening to this evidence, would come away thinking what 80% of these chats on these live streams are saying, which is that they believe that 60 some people are all in on the fact that they murdered this man, this beloved man, a cop, a young, handsome cop who decided to become a dad, a young single bachelor who decided to become a dad so that he could raise his niece and nephew. An honorable man, a man of high esteem and integrity, a man that the whole town, like he was like a mini celebrity in a way, because everybody knew about the tragedy, what happened to his family, and how he stepped in to be a hero for these people. So a beloved man of service, a cop, a family man, a man that for all evidence that they have brought out and witnesses seemed to have been a good man, a nice man, a kind man, a thoughtful man, somebody who was beloved and cared about by people in his community for decades, that he'd been friends with people that he'd known since middle school, Carrie Roberts, and that he was friends with parents of kids who had befriended his kids, and like Jen McCabe, and that he did have a strong support system around him. Why is that a bad thing? They're trying to take the fact that there were these close-knit people who loved and supported each other and turn it into a conspiracy theory. But it just doesn't make any sense. What did this man do or know that would make everyday people, civilians, EMTs, doctors, researchers, forensic scientists, expert witnesses, they all decided, they somehow know that John was murdered and it needs to be covered up, and so they're all lying. Like, did they walk in and they had a script handed to them? The get their story straight between Jen McCabe and Carrie Roberts, which was apparently writing this whole script for all these elaborate people in all these different areas. They all just happened to get the memo. They all knew what to say to frame this woman. They all are in on it. For what fucking end? Like Brian Higgins said, what's your end game? What do you want from me? Karen initiated texting for booty call purposes a friend of her man. And then she had the nerve to be like, you only know that I'm seeing somebody because we go to the same bar. No, bitch, you are texting this man's friend. That's why he knows that you're with someone. Like, what are you talking about? He's not just some rando that you met at the bar, that you went to with your boyfriend one time and he saw you there and he just happens to know. He is literally a Boston cop right alongside your man, working in the same department. Like, talk about fucking cringe. Talk about revenge plot, angry girlfriend, jealous, unhinged. And I heard the Aruba witnesses from the last trial, the first trial, and they seem sincere and believable and compassionate and empathetic and sympathetic and likable. So yet again, we're supposed to believe that they too are in on it. They too know that John was murdered and are covering it up and framing Karen by saying that she saw John greeting his good friend from years back, who she thinks of John as like a big brother kind of person, because her husband committed suicide and was partners with John. And so he stepped up to take his widow and like sister, the widow's sister, under his wing and be friends with them and be there for them too. And that's who this bitch Karen was like, fuck you! But y'all out here, Karen Reed, sycophant, cult, drinking the Kool-Aid, Karen Reed, lover, suckers. Like, what are you talking about? And then Karen was like, she's gross, and that makes it worse. And the girl gets on the stand, and she's freaking drop dead, beautiful, gorgeous. Like, oh, okay, Karen. But that's the woman. So that's why I feel like these chats, like Court TV, Law and Crime, and Emily D. Baker, which I still love you. I'm still your member, even though you couldn't give a fucking flying shit. Almost, that was another thing I wanted to add about Emily, is that, when... All right, now it's 8:58 p.m. I turned the light off because it hurts my eyes to have it so bright in my face. So I was saying, I realized that Emily D. Baker, she is on the path to having 1 million subscribers. She does this as a full-time job, and it's only natural. Like, I was annoyed that her title for the video about Brian Higgins and Karen Reed's text messages were Brian Higgins texts revealed, and it should say Karen Reed's text revealed, because what Brian Higgins's texts revealed was that he was suspicious. He was questioning her literally from jump. From the first text, he was like, who is this? With a question mark. How'd you get my number? And even though it's true, like what Yuri Buchanan said, yes, there were some flirtations and some compliments and things like that. But overall, it's clear to anyone who's discerning and not histrionic, borderline personality, kind of like drank in the Kool-Aid. You watch too many dramas. You think that Law and Order is like the show, not like reality. You believe the most outlandish, fantastical, delusional, complex cover-ups of all time. All for who and what and why. And, yeah. Oh, but what I was saying is that, Emily... while I do believe that she's mostly fair, I also agree with myself that she is definitely pushing an angle because it gets more views. And 80% of the chats are drinking the fucking free Karen Reed Kool-Aid. But, so, I'm putting down my prediction. My prediction is she's going to be found guilty. So one of the biggest contentions that I had the first trial, and even up till just the other day, was how did they get to second-degree murder? How did they get there? But what I learned, which I put in one of my last videos, is that second-degree murder does not only mean she struck him with her vehicle because she wanted him dead. It doesn't mean only that. It could also mean Second-degree murder can also be when you're behaving in such a way that is so reckless, so depraved, puts someone in such grave danger that you should have known that you were likely to kill someone. For example, getting behind the wheel of an SUV with 7 vodka tonics in you, or 5, and getting in your car in a snowstorm and at night, intoxicated, and driving like the way she did. And we haven't gotten to the point where it's really dark. Okay, looking over my phone to read. Trooper Joseph Paul, State Police Trooper Joseph Paul, a crash reconstructionist, which many people disparaged and said, he was crap, provided detailed insight into the movements, of course, the defense, provided detailed insights into the movements of Reed's SUV near 34 Fairview Road, findings from his testimony, data retrieved from the SUV's TechStream software indicated that the vehicle was initially in drive, came to a complete stop, then shifted into reverse. While reversing, the SUV accelerated to approximately 24.2 miles per hour and traveled a distance of 62.5 feet. Trooper Paul noted that there was a point during the sequence that appeared consistent with a pedestrian being struck based on the sudden change in speed. He further testified that the injuries sustained by John O'Keefe were consistent with those typically observed in pedestrian strikes. And although everybody and their fucking grandma up in here saying, there's no way, he had no bodily injuries and none of it was consistent with being hit. It's like, but it is possible for someone to be struck by a vehicle, even fatally, without sustaining broken bones. Though it is uncommon, the lack of fracture does not automatically rule out a pedestrian strike, especially depending on the speed of the impact, the angle of the surface, and the physiology of the victim. Low speed impact, reverse at 24 miles per hour is in the threshold where a fatal injury can occur without skeletal trauma. If the head strikes a curb, icy pavement, or another hard surface like an icy frozen lawn, a severe brain injury can occur without other bodily injuries or fractures. The vehicle may not cause lethal injury directly. Instead, if the person falls awkwardly and sustains a traumatic brain injury, for example, if John O'Keefe was knocked off balance or pushed by the reversing SUV, his head could have hit the ice, the concrete, a fixed object like the fire hydrant, or a frozen ground, resulting in death without skeletal breaks. We know that he wasn't wearing heavy clothing. Okay, so forensics pathologists have documented cases where victims of impacts have died from the head trauma alone with no external injuries or fractures. And just because something is unusual or, even rare, or maybe only 10 to 30% of fatal strikes occur without broken bones. However, that doesn't mean it never happens. It doesn't mean that it's not possible. Just because it's not the norm doesn't mean it's not real. Just like with anything, any situation where 90% of the time it goes a certain way, that doesn't mean that the 10% of the time when it goes a different way, it just can't happen. It's just not possible. Like, there's so many ways where she could have clipped him, like she said herself. He could have slipped. It could have been enough to fling him, and he may have hit his head where his cracked his skull, but it just didn't result in other bodily fractures. It's not impossible. It happens. It happens 10 to 30% of the time. Somebody is struck by a vehicle and they die without broken bones. So the whole like, oh, it could have never happened, like, okay, because you're desperately clinging to the defense talking points and you want that to be true. But that doesn't erase all of the shattered taillight pieces. And it's like people are trying to say that Trooper Proctor planted it all, but there's literally photographic and video evidence of her vehicle with a busted taillight in multiple videos. The video when they pulled up doing the wellness check, the video when she pulled out to go back out at 5 something in the morning, and the video of them getting her vehicle from her parents' house. You could see it right there. So, plus there's all the confessions that she made. I personally believe that she is going to be found guilty this time, and she's going to get 5 to 20 plus. That's my genuine prediction. I could be wrong, but I'm putting this video out there. It's going to be on my public page, and when her sentence comes, you can come back and say, hey, was my prediction right or wrong? I literally don't win or lose nothing. I'm not betting on this. I don't get paid from Karen Reed. I don't get paid from the Commonwealth, and I barely get paid on YouTube. I got, I'm so grateful for the new subscribers that I have. But I'll take this time to say, hey, if you like my content, if you like my videos, if you enjoy hearing another perspective that is not like 80% of the rest of these sycophant, Karen-loving, cult member, Kool-Aid drinking, whatever. Oh, I believe that 60 plus people are covering up a murder of a really good man who was doing a really good thing and everybody liked him. And I think that makes sense. Or one unhinged, jealous, crazy, insecure, drunk, psycho, stalker, crazy bitch drank too much and hit him with her car. Whether she knew it or not, eventually she figured it out. I believe she figured it out before she called Jen and Kerry and headed back out. And she covered it up. And now she's blaming everybody else. And did you know that blaming other people for a crime that you committed is also a crime? And when and if, which I do predict, she gets found guilty, Jen, Kerry, the Alberts, and anybody else on that list can sue that bitch for defamation because of the fucking shit, the pain and suffering, the bullying, the excruciating shit that they've been going through. All the people out here talking about they're liars, they're murderers, and all the while, no, they're not. They're innocent victims of Karen Reed's web of deceit. And I think that's sickening. And I think that they should sue her. And I think they will sue her and they're going to win. Because they have been put through fucking hell. A nightmare. Because she lied about her own actions and tried to blame them. Did blame them. She's actively blaming them and calling them liars when she's the fucking murderer. Allegedly. So this is the screen recording I took of my own video from last year, May 27th, 2024. When Brian Higgins was reading the text messages between him and Karen. And I love his accent and the way he pronounced them and says them. This was my video from last year. And he's being questioned by Commonwealth Attorney Lally.
Now, Mr. Higgins, first of all, may I request permission to publish the video on screen?
Yes.
Start with page number 1. Now, Mr. Higgins, what's up on the screen, is that what you have before you as Exhibit 104A?
Yes.
And as you just mentioned, these are text messages between yourself and Ms. Reed, is that correct?
Yes.
And on what date did you first receive any communication from Ms. Reed?
January 12th, 2022.
And prior to that, had you had her number, or did she have your number as far as you're aware?
No.
You had never communicated to her via cell phone or any other means prior to January 12th, 2022?
No, I had not.
So initially, you received a text on that day from an unknown number. Is that correct?
Yes.
And from the text before you and what's up on the screen, as far as there are gray bubbles on the left, blue bubbles on the right, which is you and which is Ms. Reed?
The blue bubbles would belong to myself.
So the other bubbles would be Ms. Reed. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And so that initial communication you received on January 12th, 2022, that's about 8:27 p.m. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what was the content of the message that you received?
You want me to read it?
Yes, please.
Hey, Brian, it's Weed Whacker.
And how did you respond to that?
Question mark.
And if it's helpful to you, sir, if you can't see the screen sort of from where you are, you can read along in the exhibit before you.
Okay.
Now, as far as that communication is concerned, is the Weed Whacker, what, if any, meaning did that have to you? Or
So ultimately, it was based off a interaction with the defendant, kind of a nickname that she adopted.
And how did that nickname sort of come to be, or what, if anything, transpired between the two of you that led to that?
So I was leaving, I believe, my residence one day in Canton, traveling down Pleasant Street. I saw the defendant along the side of the house on the Pleasant Street side using a weed whacker, and I gave kind of a beep of the horn, and the defendant gave me the finger. So I realized that she clearly must not have recognized me possibly because of what I was driving. I was in my work vehicle. So I spun the vehicle around, and as I pulled up to roll down the window, she said something to the effect, "Get the fuck away from me. My husband's a Boston cop." And then I rolled down the window more, and she clearly recognized me, who I was in that vehicle.
And did that become sort of a recurring theme in subsequent conversations that you had with Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Now, sir, if I could direct your attention to page 6 within that exhibit before you.
They're not numbered, right, Mr. Lally?
I'm sorry?
They're not numbered? Is your copy numbered?
No, Your Honor. Not that I can see.
They're not, so be cognizant of that when you ask questions.
You know, I believe they are, so that's why I hesitated.
Are you,
It's sort of in the middle of the page, facing sideways. Front page.
oh, my apologies. I have it now. Very small.
So just on this page, directing your attention to the bottom, it sort of goes on to the next date of January 13th. Is that correct?
Yes.
And if I could direct your attention to page 7 of those text messages, and it's going to look like that, page 7 on the screen. And sir, if you could read from page 7, and if you could just indicate who's speaking and what is being said in this communication.
So again, I'm in the blue bubbles. Did you try those Smirnoff screwdrivers? I stopped at the Hilly for one last night. I said, haha, how did you get my digits? Defendant responded, the Melissa and Lito show. I said, haha, I thought you creeped John's phone. I said, haha, again. Defendant responded, no way. I was the last person in Greater Canton who didn't have your number. I think even Kerry has it. I responded, what, with a bunch of question marks? I said, I just don't give my personal number out to anyone. How would Kerry have my number with a bunch of question mark? And the defendant responded, Melissa had it.
As far as in those communications, the reference the defendant makes to the Melissa Lito show, do you know what that means?
The two individuals that I also know from the hillside.
And the Kerry person that she refers to, do you know who that is?
I believe that's Kerry Curran, Chris Curran's wife.
Now, if I could direct your attention to page 9. And if you can find that page 9. And again, sir, if you could read from page 9 as far as that conversation goes and just indicate whom is speaking at different points.
Okay, so the defendant said, I prefer weed whacker. I responded, that's the thing about nicknames. Defendant said, we were tossing around the idea of a short vacay with the Curran show, wanted to see if you were game. I responded, you don't have a say. And I believe I was referring to nicknames. And I said, vacation where? Defendant responded, I know. They need to happen organically. I'm the queen of nicknames. Was just going to rent a beach house in, I believe it was supposed to say Fort Lauderdale. It's abbreviated. Something quick and easy. I said, Defendant responded, I'm the queen of vacays too. Always a good time. I responded, I'm going to Nashville next month, 19 to 21st, for a benefit. One of our guys got shot in the head. You guys should come.
As far as either one of those trips that you were discussing, do you recall any further discussion or any going on any of those trips?
Well, I mean, I definitely went to Nashville for that benefit for one of my coworkers. There may have been more conversation about the Florida trip, but I can't specifically recall it.
Now, sir, if I could direct your attention to page 16, Mr. Chairman, if I could have that. And this is on that same date of January 13th, is that correct?
I believe so. The date's not at the top yet, but I believe it is.
And again, sir, if you could read from that page of communication as far as who was speaking and what was said.
So there's a photograph of somebody with a weed whacker. The defendant said, no, you're not a creep. I said, nope. She said, you're kind of a loner, which I used to be. I responded, no, not really. I have a ton of buddies, but I only let a handful of friends in that I'm tight with. So you think you got me figured out? And then I typed circle of trust in quotes.
And sir, if I could direct your attention to the next page, number 17. It's coming if I get that. And again, sir, if you could read from page 17 as far as what is said and who is talking.
So the defendant said, yeah, I said loner, not loser. I assume you know a lot of people, PPL, people abbreviated. You never really can figure anyone out completely. Your dad died when you were young, and I responded, he died in March of 2020. I'm so not a loser, you won't figure me out, LOL. Defendant responded, no one is a loser, I just didn't mean loner to imply friendless. I'm sorry that's recent. It wasn't COVID, was it? I responded, cancer. Defendant responded, I know you date girls who don't lock the house behind them, and you are private and observant. I'm sorry, what kind? I responded, lung, brain, kidney, and pelvis. How do you know all these things, LOL?
If I could turn your attention to the next page, page 18. And again, sir, if you could read from that.
In the blue bubbles is me. I said, you're funny. Defendant responded, yikes, wow, that's rough. Jesus, I'm sorry. We chat a lot at the hillside. I responded, don't be sorry, life is hard sometimes. I always figure it out. Then I said, who chats, question mark. Defendant responded, life is hard, but losing people is the hardest. So I'm sorry, we chat. I responded, that's all you got, we chat? Sure, you're from Brockton, spit it out. Defendant responded, you and I chatted about the girl who kept forgetting to lock the door. I said, oh, she has been out of play like for 3 months now. And then I believe it starts to say, out of rotation, question mark.
And then, sir, if I could direct your attention to page 20. And again, sir, if you could read from that.
I'm in the blue bubbles again. I said, I just got a Saturday invite. The defendant said, did you say yes, question mark? I said, not yet, with a bunch of periods, but did respond. Defendant said, what did you say, Mr. Elusive? I responded, no, I just don't want to intrude on your couple's night. Haha, I'm shy. The defendant responded, we prefer to hang out with non-couples. Bob Gallery is probably coming too, solo. We'll probably do cards or something at some point. I'm inviting you. And I said, haha.
Now, sir, is that the Saturday night that's being referenced there? Is that the same night that you had gone over to the home at some point for the Patriots game?
Yes.
And if I could direct your attention to the next page, page 21.
Yes.
And again, if you could read from that.
The defendant said, John said Brian's being wishy-washy now, in quotes. I responded, haha, did you tell him you texted me? The defendant responded, no. And then I gave a thumbs up. Then I said, you cranky now, question mark. Defendant said, haha, no, just stop being so anti-couples. Most couples don't even like each other. I said, name a few. Defendant said, name a few? I don't know. All of them, question mark. They all want to hang out with single people. And then I said,
Thank you. Sir, if I could direct your attention to page 26. And sir, if I could ask you to read from that page.
In blue is going to be myself again. Foul ball. Defendant responded, you stink. I said, you suck and you're double trouble. Defendant responded, you're hot. I responded, are you serious or messing with me? Defendant responded, no, I'm serious. I responded, failing is mutual. Is that bad? How long have you thought that? Defendant responded, are you okay driving? You don't want to stay here. I responded back, I'm fine. I have an office at the PD. You didn't answer the question. And then it starts to say, defendant said, rather you stay here.
And is that, to your memory, when is that text exchange taking place? In reference to the night that you went over to the Okies.
I believe it was that night.
Now, at Mr. O'Keefe's house on that particular evening, do you recall how you came into the house?
I believe it might have been the front door.
And if you know about how long were you at Mr. O'Keefe's house that night?
I was probably one of the last people to leave, I think.
And what, if anything, happened as you were exiting from Mr. O'Keefe's house that night?
So as I was exiting the house, it was either through the breezeway or the garage. And as we were walking out, the defendant planted a kiss on me.
Now, before you went out that way, where was Mr. O'Keefe? Did you say goodbye to him or anything like that?
I think I said goodbye to him. He might have been in the bathroom. I'm not 100% positive where he was.
And when you went to leave, which exit from the house were you headed to initially?
Well, as I said, I don't remember exactly if it was the breezeway or the garage I was starting to walk through, but whichever way I started to exit, the defendant told me to go a different way.
And which way did the defendant tell you to go?
Well, her way. I honestly can't tell you which door that was. If it was either the breezeway or the garage.
And as you were going out, again, I'm sorry, what happened?
The defendant kissed me,
And how did she kiss you?
not like a friend.
Lip to lip, is that fair to say?
Yes,
Like a romantic kiss.
that's the way I interpreted it.
And were you still inside the house at the time that this occurred, or were you outside the house, if you know?
Not sure if we had just got to the outside or not. It might have. I'm not sure if it was close proximity to leaving.
And what was your reaction to that?
I was taken back.
Was that something that you were expecting?
No.
And about how long was it between when the defendant kissed you and when you left?
Oh, almost immediately.
Now, sir, if I could turn your attention back to the exhibit before you on page number 27.
Yes.
Again, sir, if you could read from that page and who's speaking.
So I'm in the blue bubbles, and I said, I think you're messing with me. The defendant said, why do you think that? I responded, because this is so out of left field. Where did these feelings come from? Defendant responded, I just think you're like me. I said, meaning? Question mark. Defendant said, do you have your own kids? I said, I have no kids. How am I like you? Question mark. Hello? And defendant responded, aren't we alike? I responded, I think so. So why did you get my number and reach out to me? And I think the defendant put a question mark on that bubble, I believe. Or I might have, I don't know.
Now, that conversation as far as you asking her about why she reached out to you, how often was that question asked by you through the course of these text communications?
Well, the extent of the actual communication via text between the defendant and I was between January 12th and January 29th when John passed. On the 28th and 29th, the 28th, I sent the text, as we spoke about before, when we were at the waterfall. That text didn't respond. There was a text sent by the defendant to me the next day. So in that time period between the 12th and the 29th, there was 9 days that the defendant and I exchanged text messages. With that being said, those text messages, I don't believe, were every day, consecutive days. There was 9 days in between the 12th and the 29th.
And so as far as that questioning, as far as posing to her, why did she reach out to you? Was that something that you asked once or more than once?
Yeah, I asked it more than once, and during the pendency of this communication, I was basically trying to suss out what the intentions were of the defendant. Was the defendant interested in me? Was she at the end of her relationship with John? Was she trying to weaponize me against John and put me in the middle? There was numerous things that were going on, and that's what I was trying to vet out or suss out, or whatever you want to call it, but I was having a hard time accepting what was happening.
And sir, if I could direct you to the next page, page 28. And again, sir, if you could read from that page.
So I'm in the blue bubbles. Shoot straight with me. Defendant responded, I told you, I just think we're alike, right? Couple question marks. I responded, yes, agree. Now what? Defendant responded, I don't know. I said, shouldn't you know? Defendant responded, do you like me? I said, yes, from jump. Defendant said, when was jump? I said, first time I saw you. Defendant responded, when was that? I said, Hillside, for your sure.
If I could direct your attention to the next page, 29. If I could ask you to read from that, sir.
So again, I'm in the blue bubbles. Hillside for sure. When were you interested? Defendant responded, I don't know, you're just my type. I responded, you think you can handle me? I thought you were happy, question mark. Defendant responded, how do you know if I'm happy? I said, I just assumed. Defendant responded, are you hard to handle? I may have put a question mark. Then I said, what do you like about me? Defendant responded, I just feel like you're from my neighborhood. I said, yes, yeah, ditto. Defendant responded, and I think you're hot.
And if I could direct your attention to the next page, page 30. If I could ask you to read from that, sir.
I'm in the blue bubbles again. You really think that? I have always thought that about you. Defendant responded, what? I responded that you're hot, smart, witty, but I didn't think you were interested. Defendant responded, witty? I responded, yeah, meaning quick with the response. Tell me why you got my number and reached out to me. Defendant responded, just thought we were the same / from the same neighborhood. I responded, are you afraid to say what's on your mind? What's in your mind? And then I said, on. Defendant responded, No, didn't I? No, didn't I? Question mark.
And sir, if I could turn your attention, to the next page, 31, and ask you to read from that.
I'm glad I'm in the blue bubble again. I'm glad I stopped by. I should have come earlier. Do you really live in Mansfield? Defendant responded, yeah. I was basically begging you. I responded, you don't have to beg me. I meant to say beg. Defendant responded, huh? I said, I will give you what you want. How are you texting right now? And I said, leaving me hanging. Defendant responded, no. I typed kids and then kinda. Defendant responded, how am I texting? And I began to say, is everyone asleep?
As far as the communication from the defendant indicating, yeah, I was basically begging you, what did you take that to mean?
That you wanted me to come over?
And if I could turn your attention to the next page, 32. If I could ask you to read from that page as well.
So it starts off with the defendant saying, I just wide awake on my phone. Yes, they are. I said, I should have stayed LOL. So now what? Question mark. Defendant said, yes, you should have. I responded, that would have been distracting. So now what? So no, what? And then I said, now. Defendant said, now what? Question mark. I responded, balls in your court. Defendant said, what do you want? I responded, loaded question. What do you want? Question mark. Defendant responded, I asked you, exclamation point. I in turn said, nope, you initiated this.
If I could turn your attention to the next page. If I could ask you to read from that, sir.
I said, spit it out. I'm in the blue bubbles. Defendant said, hey, we're single and we don't have kids. We can do whatever we want. I responded, don't you have a boyfriend? Question mark. Defendant responded, where are you? Question mark. I said, Canton. Defendant said, where? Question mark. I responded, my office is at the PD. Why? Are you going to Mansfield? Question mark. Defendant responded, where is that? I said, Canton PD. Defendant said, I have a house there from before I reconnected W. John. I responded, oh, I feel like you're not really saying what's on your mind.
I'd like to turn your attention to the next page, 34, and ask you to read from that, sir.
Defendant starts off and says, do you like me? Question mark. I responded, yes, clearly. Defendant said, come over my house. I responded, when? Question mark. Defendant said, when works for you? I said, whoever, and then whenever. When works for you? Question mark. The defendant said, I asked you first. I responded, I think you're messing with me. Defendant said, I'm glad you came over tonight, with some type of face. I responded, me too, balls in your court. What do you want, Karen? You look great tonight.
If I could direct your attention to the next page, 35, and the last, or second to last blue bubble down the bottom, starting with, are you glad? Do you see that?
Page 35?
Yes.
And where is it again?
Second to last blue bubble, starting with, are you glad?
Yes. I said, I'm in the blue bubble. I said, are you glad you walked me out? Question mark.
And what did she respond?
Defendant said, yes, with like semicolon, some type of a mark there. Are you? Question mark. And I said, DEF for definitely.
And if I could direct your attention to the next page, 36. And if you could, please read from that.
So at the top, I'm in the blue bubbles. It says yes. And then I said, are you going home tonight or tomorrow AM? Defendant texted, we kissed, comma, right? Question mark. So then I put a question mark on her question and said, is this a trick question? Defendant said, I don't know when I'm going home. I'm selling my house, with what I think is a smiley face. What a trick question, and a couple of question marks. I responded, are you moving to Canton? I'm following your lead with this. Defendant responded, I live here, but I have property in Mfield. I'm guessing it's Medfield. Defendant said, why my lead? I don't want any responsibility. I responded, you started this, right? Question mark. Why did you get my number? And it says, each out to me. It meant to say, reach out to me. I then said, still have not told me.
And sir, if I could direct your attention to the next page, 37, and ask you to read from that.
Defendant said, sorry, should I not have? I responded, I'm fine with it. Just don't know why you can't answer. Defendant said, you're mad at me? I said, OMG, no, not at all. You're being silly. Defendant said, I told you, exclamation point. I just think you like me and I'm attracted to you. And then she said, a lot. I responded, feeling is mutual. I just never saw this coming. Defendant said, why? Question mark. I responded, because I just assumed you were happy with your situation. Defendant responded, I was, but things have deteriorated.
And if I could direct your attention to the next page, 38, and ask you to read from that, sir.
I said, why? Question mark. How so? Question mark. What did Melissa say when you asked for my number? Question mark. Defendant responded, it is very, very complicated. He and I dated when we were kids, and then his sister died and everything got fucked up. I responded, he seems very into you. Defendant responded, I just told Melissa that I had your number but lost it. I said, that's cute. She wasn't suspicious, question mark. Defendant responded, no, she's great. I responded, does she know you like me, question mark. Defendant responded, she's a sweetie, we just agreed, you are great, with another smiley type face.
And sir, if I could direct your attention to page 40, and ask you to read from that.
Defendant said, yeah, but where is that? I have had all my shit here for a couple of years and my house has been vacant, but I'd like to get closer to the water. I responded, are you breaking up or staying together? Defendant responded, I don't know. He hooked up with another girl on vacation. I'm very close to his niece. It is a very fucked up situation. I responded, when was that and how did you find out he hooked up, question mark. I don't want to complicate your situation. Defendant responded, we went away for New Year's, the four of us. I put the kids to bed and found him in the lobby of our hotel all over one of our friends. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I responded, it does matter.
Now, as far as that indication that she made to you, either through text communications or in person, did she indicate at any point in time where that occurred?
So there was an occasion that the defendant stopped at my house. And again, the conversation that took place at my house was in relation to, again, sussing out and trying to figure out if this was everything that I stated before. Like, was this legitimate? Was she seriously interested in me? Was she at the end of her relationship with John? And during that, there was touch on that topic, and I became to realize, it was my understanding at that point that this incident took place in Aruba on New Year's Eve, based off the text messages and the conversation at my residence.
This was something that she brought up not only in the text communications with you, but in person in communication with you as well.
Yes, I mean, outside of being over there for the game, there was only one time that the defendant and I ever interacted on a one-on-one basis.
If I could direct your attention to the next page, 41, and ask you to read from that.
So I'm in the blue bubbles, and I said, did they bang, question mark? The defendant responded, does that matter, question mark? I said, sorry, I was just asking. I was just trying to figure shit out. Defendant responded, it doesn't really matter. I said, okay, I won't ask again. Defendant said, I don't care, with a smiley face. It doesn't matter. I responded back, okay, hear you loud and clear, Karen. Defendant responded, okay. I responded, why are you getting your thing all twisted up over simple questions? And then I typed on. Defendant responded, I'm not. I am, question mark. I responded, you're kind of getting defensive. Defendant responded, not at all, with an exclamation point.
Thank you, sir. If I could direct your attention to page 46. Ask you to read from that.
Defendant is in gray. She said, we did kiss earlier, comma, no, with an exclamation point. I responded in blue bubble, I think you initiated that, no, question mark. Defendant said, yup, do I owe you an apology, question mark. I said, OMG, no, why are you being sensitive? Defendant responded, I'm not. I responded, kinda. There's a P and a FFT, never, responded by the defendant. What do you want from me, question mark? I responded, what's on the table, question mark. Defendant said, what do you want ideally, question mark. I responded, the real deal. Defendant responded, it doesn't exist.
Thank you, sir. I could direct your attention to page 57, sir. And ask you to read from that.
It starts off in blue. I said, I can go to any base, but usually Hanscom and Bedford are down to the Cape. Defendant responded, which base down the Cape? Which branch? I said, Army's Army. Defendant said, I'm not abnormally sensitive. I responded, Joint Base Cape Cod. I won't be so hard on you. Defendant responded, OMG, you're not. You called me trouble. That makes me sound bad. I responded, I was just playing with you. Defendant responded, you weren't, but that's okay. I responded, stop being sensitive, please. Defendant responded, I'm not.
Now, sir, in reference, in that page of text communications, you made reference to a base down the Cape, is that right?
Yes.
And where is that in relation to where you live in Barnstable County?
So I can utilize one of the gates to get onto the base. I can get fuel. I can shop. I then can hit the Bourne Bridge, and I would use that as a cut through at the time when I was splitting my time between two different properties.
Is there also like a duty-free shop there?
There is, yes.
And at some point throughout the course of the text communications, did you offer to pick something up for the defendant from that shop?
I believe so.
If I could direct your attention to page 60. And ask you to read from that, sir.
Defendant said, I don't know, question mark. It's an old colonial. It has a lot of bedrooms with kind of an emoji. I responded, more than you clearly need. Are you moving to Canton, question mark. Defendant said, I know, seriously. Some rooms I only go into dust. Not anytime soon. I'm there most of the time, but sometimes it's a lot. I responded, a lot, why, question mark. Defendant responded, I then said, do you even know what you want, question mark, or who, question mark. Defendant responded, because I went from being solo to trying to give attention to kids who aren't mine, and I never wanted kids. I responded, I thought you were in this happy relationship. Defendant responded, everyone is happy at the hillside.
If I could direct your attention to the next page, 61, and ask you to read from that.
So it starts off with the defendant. It said, everyone is happy at the hillside, exclamation point. I responded, oh God, you avoid things. Defendant responded, it's just very, very complicated dynamic with the four of us. He isn't cut out for what he's doing, and the kids present constant issues. I responded, I think he believes he is doing the right thing. Defendant responded, well, of course he is, but his heart isn't in it. It's only because he was very, very close to his sister. I responded back, I know how you feel, kinda. I was married, and when I met her, she had a 2.5-year-old. I went from being single to being a dad. It's hard. Then I said, I'm divorced since 2017 and have no kids.
If I could ask you to turn to the next page, 62, and ask you to read from that, sir.
I said, I'm divorced since 2017 and I have no kids. Defendant responded, I try very hard, but they are very spoiled, and they're not my family. My parents keep telling me I'd feel differently if they were mine or my own sisters. Then I told you he got drunk and sloppy on NYE while we were away, and that has really affected me. I responded, what did he exactly do, question mark. Defendant responded, I never got married, and now somehow I'm arguing someone about raising kids with an emoji. I responded, why don't you tell me, question mark. Defendant responded, he was a puddle all day and then disappeared. Then I found him all over our friend's sister in the lobby of our hotel, and she's gross, which I think may actually be worse, not sure. I responded, oh God, did they bang?
And ask you to turn to the next page, sir, page 63, if you could read from that.
I'm in the blue. I said, did they bang, question mark. Defendant said, so I was the kid celebrating New Year's, I think it's without him, which shouldn't be my role. No, I doubt it. He was a mess. I said, was it the first time with her, or do you think there were others? Defendant responded, I don't really think there were others. I'm with him all the time. He never seems to want to go anywhere, without me. But honestly, the issues with the kids bother me more than him actually cheating. They are constant, and it feels like a lose-lose. I responded, you clearly have a lot of feelings swirling inside you. Defendant responded, yeah, it's very complicated. Sorry for the rant. I responded, or began to respond, you can vent, babe.
If I could turn your attention to the next page, 64, ask you to read from that, sir.
Defendant said, basically, I just feel like I spread myself too thin, and sometimes it's thankless. I responded, Defendant responded, you probably felt that way too. I responded, I did at times. It was one, not two, thankfully. Defendant responded, want to grab a drink, question mark. I responded, if you gave me some notice, I could have. Defendant responded, you in capital letters said you were adaptable. I responded, I am, but I have my work truck with me and not my personal. Do you get angry when you don't get your way? Defendant responded, that sounds like an excuse. I rarely get my way.
Now, as far as her invitation, is that something that occurred on one time or more than one time?
I believe it was more than one time.
And at any point in time, other than the two you've already recounted, as far as going over to Mr. O'Keefe's house for the football game, or the defendant stopping by your apartment in West Roxbury, were there any other occasions you went out over the defendant's house or out with the defendant by yourself?
No, never.
And sir, if I could direct your attention to page 74, ask you to read from that.
Defendant said, are you single, question mark. I responded, yes. Defendant said, I don't think it's out of left field. Wasn't I already begging you to come over last Saturday? Question mark, question mark. I responded, you getting my number from Melissa and reaching out to me? Question mark. Defendant said, and on vacay and probably a few other occasions. I responded, you didn't really beg. Defendant said, I asked at least twice. How do people usually reach out to each other? Question mark, question mark. I responded, why would I have thought you had any interest in me? Question mark. Usually do it when they do live with someone. And then I said, do not do it. Defendant responded, maybe, maybe not.
Thank you, sir. If I could direct you to page 77. And ask you to read from that, sir.
I said, I could go on and on, but I do not want to pump, it should say, your shit up too much. Defendant responded, thanks for saying that, but low comps at the hillside. I responded, you know how to ruin something nice. I frequent other places. The defendant responded, John has showed me about 5 times the ring video of me walking you out on Saturday, and my voice and my accent are killing me softly, with an emoji of somebody throwing up. I responded, what? Defendant responded, yeah, he has cameras everywhere, you cops, with another emoji. I responded, Jesus. Defendant said, he's like Christ. Are you guys hooking up? Question mark, question mark. And I said, OMG, great.
If I could turn your attention to the next page, 78, sir.
I responded, I don't need drama, dude. Defendant said, no, it's fine. I responded, seriously? Defendant said, I'm serious, with an exclamation point. I said, you legit planted one on me. Defendant responded, I know where the cameras are anyway, duh. And then it was OMG Bruins with an emoji after that. I responded, so your slick move isn't on there, with some question marks? Defendant responded, course not. I responded, oh my God. And then I said, I almost, an emoji with somebody throwing up. Defendant responded, it was a peck anyway. I kissed Kerry and gay Jeff too. I responded, yeah, weak. I agree.
Now, as far as cameras at Mr. O'Keefe's house, is that something that you were aware was there prior to that conversation with the defendant?
No, not that I recall.
If I could turn your attention to the next page, 79. Ask you to read from that, sir.
Defendant said, LOL, funny. I responded, so now he is jealous of me, question mark. Defendant said, no, with an exclamation. I told you, he likes you a lot. I said, which makes this worse, question mark. Defendant said, you said or did something at the bar last week, and he goes, I like Brian more and more. I responded, I think he's a good dude too. Defendant responded, yeah, he is. I responded, funny. What's your end game? What do you want from me? You will just confuse it should say the shit out of yourself, because I'm a lot of fun.
Now, sir, the he that you're referring to in those text communications, who was that, just for clarity?
John O'Keefe.
And if I could direct your attention to page 84. And I should read from that page, sir.
I said, it was fun. Defendant said, I've complimented you today too, with a couple of exclamation points and then some type of emoji. I said, and kicked my nuts in. Defendant said, OMG, how? I responded, if I had more notice, I would have grabbed a drink somewhere, so I'm all set with that's, and then I said, in quotations, that's fine, but I am not asking again. Defendant said, well, it was 7 p.m. and I'm super cool, so right now I'm asking again, with some type of I think it's a smiley face. I responded, coming to your house would have been bad for the both of us. For starters, you wouldn't have wanted me to leave. The defendant responded, now equals not. That sounds good. I responded, that's trouble. Defendant said, why, question mark.
And if I could direct your attention to page 90. Ask you to read from that, sir.
9-0?
90, yes.
The defendant said, no, I'm busting your chops, it's okay. I responded, no, you are sensitive, nice try. You don't think if I came over for a drink, we would have gotten carried away. Defendant said, you in capital letters said you were adaptable and tons of fun. I took that as an invite for an invite. And I responded, oh, okay. Defendant responded, I'm 42. I know what happens when you invite someone over for a drink. I responded, you're the master of avoidance, so you think I would just give it up. Defendant responded, I've been a lot in my life. I have a little bit of cop DM mindset, and then said, been through.
And if I could direct you to the next page, 91, sir.
Defendant said, what am I avoiding, question mark. I'm not afraid to be direct. I responded, some of my questions. Defendant responded, okay, which? Ask again. I said, nope, tricks are for kids. Defendant responded, I'm pretty sure we would have hooked up. I responded, okay. Defendant said, I can't say that, question mark. I said, of course you can. Defendant said, did I miss any other questions, sir, question mark. Probably, are you having a drink right now, question mark. Defendant said, yeah, on my second. I said, show me what you got.
And if I could direct your attention to page 99. And that's going to read from that, sir.
Defendant said, none of that is true, exclamation point. I'm not talking to other guys, and I have issues with John, and things are far from perfect. You just happen to know about him, BC, I guess, because we all hang out at the same bar. I'm sure you talk to other girls. That's what single people do. I'm not married, neither are you, neither is John. I responded, was that your attempt at a lecture or deductive reasoning, question mark? What do you want from me, question mark? Defendant said, that's just how I think / feel. You don't need to approve. I've already answered that last question a couple of times, I think. I responded, I'm not judging you, never have, never will. Defendant responded, you shouldn't. I don't know what your private life is about, nor is it my business.
Thank you, sir. If I can now direct you to page 102 and ask you to read from that.
Defendant said, my only, I'm assuming, point is that there's a difference between being married to someone and dating them, and we have no intention of ever getting married. The point of dating is not to get tied down. If you're not confident, you should be, in my mind anyway. The first two, but I don't care too much about the other girl. I responded, okay, so he is cool with you dating other people, question mark. Defendant responded, and I'm not happy per se, just realistic that there's cracks and it's far from perfect. I doubt it. If he's seeing someone else, I wouldn't want to know either way. He probably feels the same way, and you probably feel that way about whoever you hook up with. I think that's normal. I responded, okay. Defendant said, you don't agree with me, question mark, question mark.
If I could direct your attention to page 107. Ask you to read from that, sir.
Defendant said, at a bar, question mark. I responded, I wasn't suggesting anytime soon. I know you're with your friend. I meant my house. Probably after 8. Defendant said, probably after 8. I responded, okay, if you don't wanna, that's fine, no pressure. Defendant responded, I will, a drink. It looks like I tapped the bubble with a question mark. I then said, what do you drink, question mark. Are you out now, question mark. Defendant responded, sorry, I'll drink whiskey if that's what you're having. I responded, haha, send me a pic of you two.
Now, you had testified earlier about some occasion prior to the 28th when the defendant had come over your house in West Roxbury, correct?
Yes.
This page that you just read, as well as some of these successive pages after that, is that sort of arranging for that to occur after she goes out or leaves from a friend out in Boston?
I believe she was out with a friend that night in Boston, a female friend, yes.
And that evening when she came over your house, about how long was she there?
Not long.
And so what happened when she arrived, or what, if anything, did the two of you talk about?
It was kind of more of this. It was a kind of it wasn't an interrogation. It was a face-to-face version of trying to suss out and vet, like, what is this all about? Again, I mean, you know, I'm not proud of these text messages. It is what it is. I'll take responsibility for them. But, you know, John was a friend at the same time, and I certainly wasn't, if they were at the end of the relationship, they were at the end of the relationship, but I wasn't going to have somebody utilize me and weaponize me against somebody that I liked. And it was just a weird experience. It was, I don't even think either one of us finished a drink. It was, like I said, it was this type of like, what is this all about? And then she left. I think I might have asked her to text me when she got in, so I knew she got home.
Now, that evening or at any other point, in your friendship or your relationship, whatever, however you want to term it, was there any other sort of intimate contact beyond what you described occurring as she walked you out that night you were over at Mr. O'Keefe's house for the patrons?
Are you asking if she ever kissed me again?
I'm asking if there was any kissing, any sexual relationship, anything at all between yourself and the defendant?
Absolutely not. In referring to my residence when she stopped by, it was just, I was very uncomfortable, and it was just an uncomfortable situation. Just a weird vibe. That's the best I can describe it.
And lastly, sir, lastly as it applies to this, turning your attention to the last page, number 118. And there's a couple different dates from the middle to the bottom of the page, is that correct?
There is.
If I could ask you to start reading from, excuse me, where it says Sunday, January 23rd, 9:40 p.m.
Defendant, so Sunday, January 23rd at 9:40 p.m., defendant texted me, phone works, and then an emoji with arrows going like both ways. And I responded, thought you were all set, question mark. Defendant said, talking, question mark, no. Defendant texted me, phone works, and then an emoji with arrows going like both ways. And I responded, thought you were all set, question mark. Defendant said, with talking, question mark, no. I said, are you sure? And she didn't respond, and I believe I said, that was it for that, the 23rd, I'm sorry.
So then the next date that any text communication was sent between the two of you would have been Friday, 11:32 p.m., is that correct?
That's correct, that would have been when we were at the waterfall.
And again, what does the text say there?
Well.
That's from you to her, is that correct?
Yes.
And then the next text communication is the following day, or Saturday, the 29th at 11:54 a.m., is that correct?
Yes.
And who is speaking in that communication, and what is said?
That is the defendant, and the defendant said John died.
And did you respond to that at all?
No.
And did you have any other communication with Ms. Reed following receiving that text message on January 29th?
No, I have not.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Gilman, you can take it. Sir, if I could, a couple more questions for you, taking you back on the early morning of January 29th, when you had a waterfall to Fairview and then you were leaving from Fairview, if I could turn that portion into your mind. When you're pulling away from the residence, the period of time that you were talking about as far as the plow being down and scraping a little bit on the ground, can you recall that?
I do.
About how much distance are we talking about with respect to that?
Distance less than a foot, I would say. I mean, it's real quick. I heard it.
And then as far as when you're familiar with an area in the front of Mr. Albert's property at 34 Fairview, where there is a flagpole and fire hydrant?
I do know where that is. Yes.
And as you drove by the house that evening, where were you in relation to that part of the yard?
When I drove away,
Yes.
I might have been I was in the street. I pulled away, so that area would be on my passenger side.
And so what I'm asking, sir, is as you pulled away, did you pull away alongside the curb? Did you pull to the middle of the street? Or where did you direct the vehicle to go as you were pulling away?
Like any other time, I pulled away from the curb, and that's kind of it's a one-lane street, so to speak, and nobody was coming towards me, so just pulled out into the street, drove away.
If I may have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
I have no further questions of this witness, Your Honor.
I'll see you for 1 minute over here at sidebar before we begin. Jurors, feel free to stand up and stretch.
Now there's a break, and I'm just gonna let it roll. I think it's on 1.75 or 2 times speed, so
I'll do a little outro. Walking. Cat love dreaming peach.com.
So much for not having the camera in my face. I have to go home with 3 blocks. Get the light. I just saved myself 3 blocks. I'm walking out to go all my road and catch a light just across the street. Thank God.